Alright, hi, my name is Sky, and this is my little crazy idea history of the Dark Ages and what happened. This is something I've been talking about with my dad, and what we're talking about is, because I'm playing this game, Rome Total War, made by Creative Assembly, and in it, you are the nomadic, or not the nomadic, but the feudal kingdoms of Europe. Right after the fall of the Roman Empire, especially in the West, and it's like all these nomadic peoples from the Russian steppes had moved in, and what they did was, they just rampaged and terrorized the countryside. Because they were loosely disorganized. Feudal family groups, their tribes, roam around and things, and they had their tribal chiefs, who, that you'd call it a king, and that's what it was, and they had like little local lords and nobles and this and that, but it was all family based, and that's because that's the only way you could organize such a massive number of men, because what ended up happening was that these guys just had thousands upon thousands of people they could organize, call upon and move around. And it was all based on a familial line. And then the leadership got to the point that, because after you unify so many groups of people, well, how do you keep them organized? So you have these kind of loose, well, if I have a claim to leadership, I'll get it or take it. If I have a claim to leadership, I'll get it or take it. But they're in this loose land, which is the steppes. There's almost nothing to support, their living. Beyond like just whatever little wood they can get their hands on and bone they can use. It's like, and very little, stone, even. But they realized, hey, there's all these places to the west, and they kind of they move west and take over the land there, because they realized that, these people got stuff and I can take it. So they go over there and take it, and then they start moving further and more west. It's like they kind of, and they end up like absorbing. Either they become absorbed or they absorb the people they pick up, to basically feed their army. And you can imagine what that'd be crazy stuff like, pick up a bunch of orphans or rape a bunch of women and spread the seed and this and that. But, even for the feudal setup with the Franks and the Goths and Ostrogoths and the Visigoths, and there were the Elamanes, a bunch of different, little groups. The Huns. But, so these guys just roam in, and they basically they went into a massive area that was covered by a fairly large population, because, Roman society was pretty clean. It was pretty organized. It is, when you watch the show Rome, they seem to be living, kind of like equal to what we live in now. They were organized. They had a sort of law in place as well. That was the other weird thing. They had like this kind of weird secret police, the collegia, which is what kept order in society, which crazy stuff. But yeah, a large number of people could live together, and these people had to be cosmopolitan. They had to basically associate themselves in pretty friendly terms. It was somewhat strict. There was a hierarchy, but it was also kind of like there was a lot of there wasn't meanness involved. There was a lot of like, well, this is his business, and it's just us using each other in these ways, kind of thing. Because and what I'm addressing is basically you had relationships of family, relationships of money, relationships of ownership, as well. All these different people who interacted with each other and lived, based on, this is your relationship to me, kind of thing. And that's why I view Rome as a semi-barbaric society. But anyways, all these people could live together and they could live in harmony. Now imagine, and this is going to sound bad, but imagine that imagine America is Rome, and the Mexicans come take us over. All right, and so hey, viva la raza, but just it's because when you look at Mexico, you got there's a lot of corruption in the government. There's a lot of religion, that's keeping these people together, and it's also like a lot of family stuff, and there's also you got cartels, and there's different basically mafia groups, ruling Mexico, but it's what keeps them together. So now imagine that, that whole population became mobile, and then moved in, and took over, and now we got the federal government, or the federales are in charge of your community. So this. There's American troops. Oh, well, okay. You're supposed to feel like okay, you feel safe with these guys because you know that these guys are truthful. They stand for justice in the American way, and they're not going to shoot at women and kids. And they're not going to wrongfully arrest people. You hope. But also well, they're not going to take kind of baloney from people. Now replace that with federale troops, and federale troops. Well, I've heard so many stories of a group of guys, most of them bare-shirted, or bare-chested, wielding AK-47s and M16s and shotguns, with bandanas on their heads, just jeans, on, and they're running around. They're running into campgrounds, and they're rounding people up, and they're tossing people's stuff, and they're rummaging everywhere, and they're federales, and this happened to my family, my parents, when they were camping down in Mexico. But so I mean, but yeah, just it's not exactly a cohesive thing. Hey, by the way, there's parts of Mexico that are good, and there's parts that are just kind of bad. There's bad situations. So, which is just like America. So but what I'm saying is that imagine you got the federale kind of system, and they're in charge of America, and they're and they say, and we're here to stay. And by the way, you answer to us now. So that's what that's why they call it the Dark Ages, because it's basically a group of arrogant and brutally violent barbarians. But like I said, people have lived in the saddle, all their lives. They as soon as they could walk, or actually they learned to ride before they could walk. These people are always on horseback. These people lived in these stinky yurts, in these tents, and they stunk, because they didn't have access to water and cleanliness, and they're hairy, they didn't have they didn't shave, they didn't have refinements for how they appeared, and it's like and all these guys' life is riding around on a horse, singing songs, fighting. In all ways and forms, or and then practicing for war, in different ways, and drinking, and and that's it, and also, and then more to the point, raiding the hell out of each other. There were, it's like for all these populations, these people, what it was is that they would, what kept them kind of like lower and unable to do anything was that they would fight each other all the time. When you finally get an authority around that organizes and says, "Hey, stop fighting each other," and then he basically is able to enforce that, and he realizes, okay, well now I got a growing population because normally these guys are slowly killing each other off, but now, hey, cool, now we're not killing each other, we're killing them, and we're going to do a better job of it, so they take off. So yeah, these just slobbering barbarians come in, take over, and you as a community, what are you going to do? What are you going to stand up to them? You're going to try to find them. Say, no, we're not. We're not letting you in. You if you had walls, you put up the walls. But you can imagine that for a lot of these communities, they developed in Roman times, so they had no walls. There's no reason to defend them. Barbarians come in and burn the place down. And actually they would just do that on principle. They would just come through and just sack the community, or sack the place for food and whatever wealth they felt they could get their hands on. Rape the women, burn the buildings, and then move on to the next place, which is usually which is like on the way to the eventual battle they knew they were going to have to fight. In fact, they weren't always even looking for a battle. They would just kind of run through because they knew they were faster and they just get to anything before any response could be made.